We're up. So
Okay. So, hello everyone. Welcome to Meshery's Build and Release meeting. It's currently 10th of October, and we are having our Build and Release meeting. So, a brief about Meshery. Meshery is a open source CNCF project that is currently applied for incubation and would gradually be incubated. It deals with removing your YAML hell and making it into a design that you can easily use. So it's just basically removing you from the hells of YAML. So today we have our standing agenda item. Before that, I would like to ask everyone to mention your name inside the attendees list. I have shared the link inside the chat, and uh, as a as an item, we always like newcomers to introduce themselves. So I would like Priyanshu. I think you are new to this call, so would you like to introduce yourself?
Uh, Sure. I am Pranshi and I'm currently working as a software engineer at Cloudera. And I just came across Meshery recently and I wanted to contribute. So I've joined this one.
Nice, Priyanshu. Uh, Vaibhav, are you new as well? Would you like to introduce?
No, I've been here for like a month or so.
Oh, okay, next. So we have a standing agenda item of Meshery test plans. We'll circle it back at the end of the meeting. So starting with the agenda item, the first agenda item is from Jaren, Playwright E2 test plan progress. Jaren, would you like to go ahead?
Sure, I will share my screen. So basically, I'm working with end-to-end testing in the Playwright. So currently, we are facing to, for the no policy in the test case, we start to mark a new test case as unstable because we can directly test them. GitHub basically don't allow when you have like working repository and then you want to access a secret within the Fort repository. So that's why when like some type of workflow, for example, we're using a pull request target, what it does, it will check out to the main repository. So that's why we start introduce because we can check the new test case. We start marking the new test case as unstable using tags in Playwright. And yeah, for every new test case, if you want to contribute to them, you need to mark it as well. And for the Docker, we're starting to migrating to the Docker build. One primary reason is because when you use like pull request target, you don't have access to the secret because GitHub don't allow working repository to have access to them. So to be able to check out them, we need to build that without a secret. But for in this case, we able to build it using Docker and we make it as the tar file. We extract it and send it through the artifact. So the other workflow will do the checkout from the main repository and running our test case instead, but coming from the outer build from working repository. That's the flow. So here, basically, checkout from port will encapsulate as Docker image, send them through artifact to outer workflow, and outer workflow will check out from the master repo, download them, load them, drop the artifact and run the test from the main repository. So basically, build coming from fork and the test coming from the main. Um, and there one open here about the test case, I think. If anyone to contribute them.
nice. Yeah, hey, Jaren's actually before we go into sort of calling for volunteers and explaining some areas of need. I wonder if, as you go to wrap up this first topic, I wonder if we couldn't recap. Maybe somebody on the call wants to regurgitate their understanding of what you just said.
Any question regarding this case?
So hey, I'll start. Hey, just for my part, I've always had a bit of a problem with testing changes to GitHub workflows. And there's a couple of reasons for that. But one of the ones that I'm hoping you might have some insight into, Jarens, and that we might have some general guidance for all of us here and the community at large is how to well, man, there's a few questions. When you forked the repository or any of the repositories, you've made some change to some sort of code. Whatever, you made a change to the repo and you want to test out your change. Maybe your change is to a workflow. Maybe your change is to an end-to-end test using Playwright, or maybe it's an end-to-end test using Meshery CTL. But you've made some changes. You're not quite sure if it works, so you want to test them out. Now, depending upon the test that you're running, maybe it's a bash script that's running. And so you can run your bash script locally and test out your changes and see if your test works. But maybe not. Maybe it requires a Kubernetes system and then Meshery deployed inside and then a piece of another infrastructure deployed. And maybe there's this whole setup process. And when you test the changes that you have made to an end-to-end test, you're like, look, I just want the whole workflow to run, see if my changes are good, and then I'll submit a PR. And then, fingers crossed, like the changes that I've tested locally in my own fork, work when I open the PR so that I don't, for whatever reason, feel embarrassed. No one should, but it's just a natural thing. That's part of the challenge that you're addressing here, right? Like when a workflow runs on a pull request, and by the way, I sort of conflate these two things. I will often say, oh, why don't you go commit some code on that pull request? Why don't you check out that pull request? And it's like, technically, it's a branch. Typically, it's like, basically, you've got a Git branch. You're looking to merge, some Git branch into the master, the mainstream, the trunk, the master. And so just to clarify terms, when Meshery runs these various tests, like inside of a GitHub workflow, you could run just for example, you can run a bash script. And maybe that bash script says, run off and email 1,000 people. And all of a sudden, Meshery as a project is on the naughty list, on everyone's naughty list. Whoops. Hey, there's all kinds of security concerns with people, bad actors doing that sort of a thing. But also, in order for Meshery's workflows to run, there are any number of secrets or any number of project resources, or that can either be deleted or overwritten, or secrets that can be accessed and then other bad things done with them. And so there's a number of security concerns around trying to enable contributors to run as many workflows as they want to and reuse that automation to set up Kubernetes and deploy Meshery and all this stuff. And this has been a pain in the rumpus, trying to draw the right line. So that's the context for what you're saying here. You've given right here this life cycle portion. I think this is a nice high-level review of how things are to work right now. If as a contributor you've come over, you've forked the repo, maybe you're creating a PR. This where you say check out PR from fork. I don't know that. Is that the right starting point? Is it more like fork the Meshery repo or one of the Meshery repos. Or am I looking at this wrong? Are you saying anytime that someone opens a PR against master on Meshery repo, this is what happens?
No, it will, after the changes with the Docker, it will check out from the fork. Currently, it's doing checkout on the master from Meshery repo.
Communication is so hard, isn't it? Like, dude, what's the starting point for the life cycle? Like, what's the situation? What's the scenario?
So it will do like a checkout from the working repository from the author PR.
Okay.
I think he means that whenever you create a PR from the forked repo, and then the PR is uh, then this flow runs on your PR that you created on from the one of the Meshery's fork repo. So
Nice. So this process runs in the contributors forked
yeah,
repo, their fork. Now, the fact that certain portions of the workflow are maybe building code and packaging them inside of a Docker image, certainly that's how we release Meshery as a Docker image or a set of images. Although, is that first step, build and encapsulate Docker images, does that have more to do with securing secrets and passing them along from one workflow to the one job or one workflow to the next? Or
And this step, we don't specify what the secret on the build. So we just like build it to the Docker and make it to the binary file and compress it.
okay, hey, let me ask you a different question. I'm a contributor. I'd like to update some, well, in this case, end-to-end tests using Playwright so that we can, have better coverage. When I make those changes, how can I test my changes? Do I just run the Playwright command locally, assuming that maybe I've got Docker or Meshery deployed locally as well?
If the user want to contribute, he need to merge his test case to be able to get run. Because like the author checkout is basically running the test case, not from the working PR. So for contributor 4 will be used for the build.
Yep, I'm asking, okay, good. I'm asking some ignorant questions. I think part of my question is already answered inside of Meshery docs. If I go read the end-to-end testing with Playwright, there's probably a sequence, a series of command, steps to do that type of test. And so I've probably gotten myself backwards. But Shlok or others, do you guys have like a synopsis of what was being shared here?
yeah. Before the synopsis, I had a doubt. So the if we are not using the forked repo for testing, then what's the need of just building it and checking it out? So if you're testing it, the if me as a contributor, I contributed a playwright test, and then I want to check whether my playwright tests are being run and whether my tests were right. So I want to see inside my branch. But currently, you're saying that the test will always run on the Meshery master branch, and then the Docker image is built on one of my forked branches. So why was this required? Means this doesn't make sense to me, at least.
Because like GitHub separate the type of workflow they are using. Some workflow, if you want to run from the fork, it will don't have any access to the secret. Like Playwright needs some secret as well to run the test. For example, like login username and password,
Hmm.
we need it from this repository from the Meshery. But when it coming from fork, it will don't have any access to that. That's why we need to like separate them between the type of workflow running on the Meshery and running from the fourth PR.
So the playwright test will be run on Meshery master repo.
Yeah, because it need to expose
Okay.
some secret.
And then we are building this and running and testing the build test for Docker from the forked repo.
Mm.
Okay, there are two different test cases. Okay. So, means as a synopsis, Lee is saying that there's a forked repo. We are testing the build on the forked repo and testing it with the Docker build. So if the Docker build is happening or not on the forked repo, and the playwright tests are still running on Meshery master branch.
Okay, why don't you guys show that workflow then? Yeah, can you show that workflow, Jarens? You're saying that we've written a separate workflow that is to be run in forked repos, and that's distinct from the workflow that is to be run in the original repo, the upstream. Jarens, you don't have written instructions here, do you? Or?
In the workflow.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, yeah. In part, we communicate so much better over written word, and so that'll help.
So here we have like a pull request workflow from the Meshery UI, which will run the Docker build, take out from the port repo. By default, pull request it's running from the port repo, and it will building using build push action from the build context, and it will output to the binary to the file they are extracting a file. And then it's uploading to artifact. After it uploading, it will receiving by this workflow, and this workflow will check out from the Meshery repo, check out the STO and the artifact as well. And after it go to artifact, it will get loaded. I think here it will load it to the Docker image and then running. After it running, it will run the test case from the Meshery.
Then if you open the first repo, first YAML file, uh, please, the first one that you
Okay.
just opened. Yeah, if you go up, uh, yeah, so Docker build and testing on line number 22, it says that if the repository is Meshery, then only run those steps. So how would it run on the fork repo?
So basically, it
I think might be asking something dumb, but yeah, that.
in the trigger workflow, they will have the documentation here. For pull request, it will run from the last marked commit on the GitHub rev. PR from the pull request. If we use pull request target, it will run from the base branch, meaning it's from the Meshery. So if it from merge branch, it will come from the PR from forking repo.
Makes sense. Yeah, if you go back to the workflow. You know, where's the merged that pull request event that you were just looking at? Where's that being? Okay, it's being used in the trigger, right? And it's but whether or not all it's looking at is the branch, not the org.
Basically, like it's the default behavior by GitHub, which they specify here.
You guys speak up.
So basically, like GitHub not really like good to like the documentation is mostly like GitHub ref and star, but they will refer to something specific. I think the author doc explain. And basically, if we use like this pull request, we can access them directly from the pull request, but we don't have like access to the secret. It's because like the security reason they are banning it. Because in past, like people start abusing the pull request target, and then they make like the policy like, hey, it will just run only on your main repository, not from the vault anymore.
Yeah, you're saying that you submit a PR against your own fork? No, you're gonna have to write this up. Also, like, let people know why it is you're doing it. I think the genesis of this particular effort has to do primarily with security and helping ensure that keys are okay. Great, good. Let's get some written words from you instead of verbal words. Good.
Anyone
I
else?
think that this is an improvement. I think another aspect of this that is probably good is generally dealing with things inside of a containerized environment. That Meshery ships as a container. The UI ships inside of a container. The servers ships inside of a container. Other adapters ship inside of a container. Meshery CTL doesn't. I think it's about the only thing that gets installed on the operating system. And because of that, well, yeah, and because of that, that Meshery CTL, that component is built n number of times over for various architectures and various operating systems. And so what I'm trying to say is that the fact that we would be building and that we would be testing and building for those tests in the same fashion that we are building for the release is probably a good thing. So in general, not only does this use of Docker images make us potentially more secure and hopefully ultimately enable contributors better so that we could potentially pass secrets along securely and let them get some amount of access to things that they would need so that they can iterate and run their own tests, but also that the environment in which the tests are running would be verbatim or the same hermetically sealed environment that we're releasing in. Hopefully, but you're gonna have to write this up, man. Good. So next, you're going to call to action for help on specific test cases. Good, great. I'm very much interested in the coverage, and on this call, on an ongoing basis, reviewing like feature coverage that we have, which is largely what the end-to-end tests that are being written using Playwright do. So if you switch to that topic real fast, I want to get into the topic of the same end-to-end tests being run from the other Meshery client, which is this CTL, Meshery CTL, and talking not always, whenever we say end-to-end test, it shouldn't be synonymous with just from the UI. It should mean also from the CLI. At one point in the project, so I'll just get into this then. At one point in the project, we were using BATS, which is an acronym for Bash Automated Test System, something like that. And it's from the 1990s or so, I don't know, it's been around for a long time, and so is Bash. And but Meshery CTL is a command line utility. So as you go to, you can, as you go to write end-to-end tests, or I don't even know that they're really end-to-end or just integration tests using and invoking Meshery CTL using Bash and using maybe a test harness around it probably makes some sense. Maybe there's some better framework. But Jarens, do you have other stuff to share before we talk about bats more?
I think that's it from me.
Nice. Good. I'll be interested in the write-up that you have, because in general, you do high quality research and help advance the project quite a bit. I don't know that anybody's getting what you're trying to communicate, or yeah. So it's good. So hey, if we go back into the meeting minutes, wherever those are, Shlok, if you have those, maybe.
Yeah. So I think we are moving to the bats topic. It's not mentioned over
Which one?
I said I think
The bats
yeah.
topic. Yeah. Hey, just I described it enough. Hey, just we're not really running tests. We're running some tests with Meshery CTL, and as it turns out, I believe that those tests, if we were to bring up some workflows, some of the more used workflows inside of the Meshery repo, we'll see Meshery CTL being invoked a time or two, and a lot of times it's just to like start Meshery server. It's not really for purposes of testing Meshery CTL and its various commands. So yeah, boy, so that's a call to arms. If folks are interested, and somebody could figure out if whatever that framework could be, just needs something consistent. We've had different people championing this in the past. There's a spreadsheet, the Meshery test plan, that is a helpful tool to figuring out like, hey, so if you go to like the second sheet in here, the second tab, it's helpful for figuring out like, geez, how many commands do we have? What are the variants of those? And are they covered? Are they invoked somewhere? And, if you really, really, really want to get into it, you can have many, 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 many variants of these tests. So a matrix of them just based, but the reality is like, hey, just doing some mainstream things goes a real long way. So one of the things that we perpetually, or for my part, this has long been my experience that, man, unless you're going to really invest into tests, it's not worth it. It's so anti-worth it. It's such a negative thing. All it does is detract. Sometimes it catches a bug or what have you. And many times they can catch a bug, all that. I'm not saying, I'm saying like, hey, we got to do it right, or just don't do it. Because otherwise what we have is a repo full of PRs that have red X's all across them. And it is demoralizing for people. It is confusing for blah, blah, blah. It's not just worthless. It's worth less than zero. It's negative. And so, Jarens, that's why there's no more of those, right? We don't have any more. We've disabled any tests that are currently failing. Is that right? I'm switching topics again.
Hmm.
Okay, good. So we can now, yeah, good. Okay. All right, good. Anyway, to cover some other topics, like I just say, hey, we've got an upcoming .8 release, and in classic fashion for Meshery, it's been a long time since we've done a release. And so there's a lot inside of it that we can go tell the world about, and that we can get ready to announce v0.8. If the project is mature in many regards, but some of its stewardship isn't, or people come and go from time to time. And like one of the things that we would have a healthy practice around at this point would be like release management. Like, hey, are we ready for a release? Well, okay. Well, how are you measuring that, or how do you know? And are the features that were planned for done? Or if some of them aren't, is it okay if they don't go in? How does that, that's one area of question. The other one is with respect to quality, and ideally, like, gating the release based on quality is usually what the focus is. Sometimes it starts with features and are we done and stuff. But then after that is like, is this something that we want to stand behind and we want to tell the world about? And that's where we would turn to these end-to-end tests that we're looking at, the unit tests that we have. And there's a whole world of things to discuss with inside of there. But so moving on to one of the other topics. All of these topics are open for you guys to bring back up in Slack or discussion forum or whenever. And if I can point you back to what we've done in the past. But one of the topics that's critical that we had promised ourselves to discuss today is that of Meshery relationships and how special the relationships are to the value that people derive from the project. And in part, like the fact that we need to make sure that lots of people comprehend how this functionality can contribute to this functionality. Also that we can have tests around this functionality. And so Jaron specifically has written a test or two specific to relationships. And so I think that something helpful to dig into this topic is to say, we've got about 8 different types of, I think 8 different, like, man, I can't think of a different word other than types, but 8 different types of relationships. You can you can define a relationship with a very high degree of granularity. And largely when you define them, you'll say, well, this kind of relationship is of this category. And this kind, I'm using the keyword in column V2, kind. Well, and it's hierarchical in nature. This one is a child, a grandchild, an aunt, an uncle, and there's some genealogy concepts involved here. But this type is like, oh, it's going to be a parent of another object, another resource. And by the way, the sort of a further third way of like specifying that it's not just your natural parent, it's your guardian. So like subtype is like a further way of qualifying that specific relationship. Maybe it's your temporary guardian, maybe it's your foster parent, and so subtype is like, and so these get interpreted largely like something like subtype, whatever. It's just we have 3 echelons of categorization. And we don't have full representation of, I said there's about 8 different relationship. There are many relationships defined, but like they all kind of get grouped together as into 8 different types at the moment. Like there's a bunch of variations of these types, but these are sort of, if you look at subtype, that column X, it's like, oh, okay, there's this subtype called inventory. Like these are all the different kinds that we have. And the visualizations for these things that visualize these relationships, like Canvas, or what we were calling mesh map before, but like Canvas, it really likes to key off of the subtype. It's sort of like that unique. It definitely uses a combination of kind, type, subtype to help figure out what the most appropriate visualization of that relationship is. Whether you're visualizing the thing or not, Meshery server and the way that our project has defined what it means to have a relationship and how you articulate these things stands without the visualization. Like it's easiest for us to certainly chat and look and talk and converse with these visualizations in mind. But the manner in which the visualization comes out, that's flexible depending upon what client wants to, display them. Now, the most prominent visual interpretation that we have is that Canvas, and people have access to it in Meshery Playground. And there are like 3 open GitHub issues at the moment pointing out where the Rego policies that interpret the relationship definitions that we have, all those lines inside the spreadsheet, somewhere between the Rego policies and this visual interpretation, we got some bugs. And so Chris and Shlok were looking at, one of the bugs that they were looking at was like, hey, there's supposed to be, well, actually, I think this, if you go back to the other, to the one that you just had with the two, I think this is really helpful to talk about to help reinforce for like Sangram and maybe Renato and the rest of us, like to just reinforce one of these concepts. So this bug was raised saying there should just be one line here. There should be a relationship that was evaluated, and when the evaluation result should be yes, there should be an edge, a line between the service and the pod. The bug is or was that when Meshery's evaluation engine would run, Meshery's evaluation engine being open policy agent, just a Golang, Golang library embedded into Meshery server that loads in these just like, 10 or 12 or so Rego policies, just evaluation expression code, kind of like SQL, if you will, to interpret the way that we've defined these relationships and interpret the resources that are inside of a design and do an evaluation and make a decision to say, yeah, there should be an edge or two edges, or now we were getting two edges between those. And the fix was it's like it's a fix, but it's sort of like half a fix. And what was happening here is that for all of the infrastructure that Meshery models, if you were to just take Meshery server unto its own, it would be you could describe it as like a highly powerful, highly capable, dumb server that like needs for you to load in content so that it can use its powers for good or evil. And so when you deploy Meshery server, when you load a model in, like the Kubernetes model, which has all the regular, the pods and the deployments and the services and all the 70-ish something Kubernetes components, Kubernetes resources that we see here. Well, the reason we were getting that bug is, well, we have one version of the Kubernetes model for like Kubernetes 131 and another one for Kubernetes 130. If you load in multiple of the same model, those relationships, they're both defined in both of the models. And the relationship engine inside of Meshery server at the moment isn't sophisticated enough to say, hey, wait a second, Tom, you're giving me duplicative relationship definitions to analyze. So it just takes them all in. And since it was doing that, it was evaluating positively twice. Like, oh, yes, so the fix for the moment is, wait, it's not the best of fixes. It's a very quick fix. It's, hey, when you ship Meshery, and we were making releases of Meshery, by default, let's not register or let's not include. Okay, I got to use my terms correctly. We're including and shipping, I believe, all versions of all the models that Meshery has. But when Meshery boots, Meshery server, you start the container and Meshery server boots up. And one of the routines that it goes through is to look to its file system and say, hey, do I have any models laying around? And if so, I'll go ahead and register those. And in that moment, Shlok enhanced it to say, well, yeah, I'm going to register them, but I'm just going to grab the latest model, just the one. So I'm going to not register a bunch of duplicative versions of the same model. And that's why That's how that got fixed.
And what's the negative consequence of that? Does that mean
Yeah,
did-
yeah, it sucks. Well, if you're using Meshery to manage a Kubernetes cluster and you're running 130, you're like, yeah, I think it's about time we upgrade, it to 131. Let's use this excellent collaborative visualization tool to see what the difference might be when we do our deployments on this version. And like part of the potentially super sweet value of a tool like this is negated because wait a second. And so the yeah, I'll be quiet for a moment to let that. The Meshery, the way that Meshery embeds and uses Open Policy Agent, this evaluation engine is just sort of, that's the term that we use to sort of generically refer to this area of Meshery, this component of Meshery server, the evaluation engine. Not to not give credit to OPA, but just, and that there's more framework utilities needed around that for a bunch of reasons. The reason that we just said, but to also have like, even if you just load up the latest models, if there are on the order of like 300 models, and every model hopefully has some relationships inside of it so that Meshery can express, intelligently comprehend what's going on and be expressive in that way. At some point, that poor little evaluation engine is going to cry out and say, I'm trying to evaluate too many things at once. Like you're just shoving all these, 300 something models with like umpteen thousand now relationships. My goodness. So you've loaded me up with relationships for Cube Vault. And the design that you're actively working on, there's no Cube Vault in sight. Like I've got, Nginx and some other stuff. So like, and yet when you go ask me to evaluate if, Nginx can relate to a Kubernetes service or a Kubernetes ingress controller, I'm having to answer that. Well, yeah, you guys get where I'm going. Like, well, wait a second. It'd be a lot, or there are efficiencies and inefficiencies to gain from saying, all right, there's a user that's working on a design. It has Nginx and a Kubernetes service and some stuff. Now, and so that implicates two models, let's say, the Nginx model and the Kubernetes model. We've got this design. The user is trying to establish a relationship. We need to ask the evaluation engine, hey, and by the way, if you could bring up the Meshery architecture deck, I think this would be helpful for others to just have this super high level idea that there's sort of two phases, if you will, to the way that these evaluations run. If you're a user inside of the UI and you're grabbing a component with your mouse, you're trying to establish a relationship, maybe it's an edge, maybe it's a parent thing or a sibling thing, whatever it is. On the UI, it's going to look like, just like in Google Slides, which is what you're seeing here. Here.
Really, my keyboard is not letting me type. Can you please share?
Sure.
Thank you.
The dog ate
tough.
my homework and I'm just messing. So everybody that's on the call will absolutely has access to the Meshery architecture deck. And a lot of you have write access to it. And some of you are kind of the owner of some of these slides because like Sangram, there's a number of slides that he sort of takes care of with the playground. But in here, there's slide 40, 4D, 40 and 41. Or Renato, would that be Quantos something? I don't know. My Spanish is, I don't know. Anyway, if here's the link to these, slide 40 and 41, they help articulate a little some of the particulars about how this, what's inside of the evaluation engine and sort of what the sequential flow is. In essence, let me drop the link. It's kind of a two-phase thing. You're in the UI, you draw a line, some relationship, and the UI says, yeah, I think that that's going to work. I'll go ahead and leave that edge right there on the screen. Hold on a second. Hey, backend. The user wants to establish this line. Is that all right? Is that cool with you? You know, we all right with that? And the backend is saying, well, okay, hold on a second. You've given me like 1,000 relationship definitions. Let me just chug through all that. And so for Chris and for others that might come to bear on this evaluation engine, one of the things that we are in need of, some of the framework of the utilities around this evaluation engine is like, hey, could we be more efficient in the moment in time in which someone's saying, I have a couple of components from 2 different models. There's only like eight relationships feasible. Hey, evaluation engine, why don't you flush out all those other relationships? Just grab the 2, you know, the handful from these 2 models. And that way you can evaluate it super fast, respond back to me. Not only can you evaluate it super fast, but also in case there were like conflicting relationships or relationships that were saying like, oh no, to override one another between models. There's a whole week's worth of discussion on this topic, by the way, because I just brought up like another concept. And the reality is that I wish desperately that we would go to the AI that's recording us right now and for the last year and like digest it and put it into a document so we could all be on the same page on like how what this stuff works. I will get it down on paper. A lot of it is on paper. A lot of it's in design specs that no one wants to read necessarily. The thing about trying to make the evaluation engine more efficient in that moment is like, well, there's a context switching cost because Renato is signed in and he's got the Nginx component and the Kubernetes pod. And so he's trying to make this line. And so he's asking the server, hey, can you do this evaluation? And then, you know, and then Sangramo's over here and he's got a different design that has a couple different models. And so this poor evaluation engine is like, wait, hold on, let me queue you up, let me flush this and load this and like context switch. And conceptually it would be faster, but there's context switching costs. So it has to be considered in context of that. Like, well, is this our use of OPA multi-threaded and like, blah, blah, blah. Like there's a lot of, but so in part, that's why there is something of a quick answer for that bug that we were just looking at, where it was like 2 lines. It's like, the quick answer here is like, let's just stop hurting ourselves for the moment and just load up the latest thing, get this into users' hands, let them enjoy it, and let some of the more seasoned users come back and complain and say, I want to compare my 2 different versions and it's not working very well. And how do I deal with that? And outside of enhancements to Meshery server, to this engine to handle, you know, overlapping model, like people are empowered themselves to go to those relationship definitions that we were just looking at. These definitions are just, you know, JSON files. We keep them in the spreadsheet to be organized and understand what's going on. But you can find these in GitHub as well. I should have brought it up in GitHub. When there's a relationship, anyway, for these definitions, they can go change it to say, oh, actually, let me help you not be overlapping. Let me tweak the definition a little bit so that these 2 models and the definitions that they contain don't really conflict. And so that they're empowered to say like, well, hey, this relationship that evaluates a hierarchical thing for config maps with deployments or whatever. It only applies to VDOT to this version or whatever they need to change to kind of, like they're empowered to help with some of that. It doesn't all have to come from the server immediately. Certainly, ultimately, long term, that's absolutely what we want to do. The part of what is needed here is like, hey, if any of you go to work on these relationships and you just like you want to test out your end-to-end playwright tests and run them and see if, you know, the tests are, if you make a change to one of those relationships in the spreadsheet that we were just looking at, and you want to test to see if it's evaluating in the right way, or if you've written some Rego and you want to test, like, we need developer tooling to help facilitate that type of testing. And one of the tools that isn't necessarily evident is like on any of the components that you might grab today, well, hopefully at least any of the Kubernetes components. One of the ways in which the relationships that we were just looking at in the spreadsheet, literally the JSON from the spreadsheet gets extracted every night, written out to a JSON file. Whenever Meshery server starts up, it reads from the JSON file. This UI interprets the relationships. There's sort of a front-end evaluation engine, a much less powerful evaluation engine, but the front-end evaluation engine says, I have a component from the model Kubernetes, and the component name is ingress class. Hey, are there any relationships out there that affect me? And so as a user and as a contributor to the project, this is one of the ways to sort of inspect if Meshery as a system is implicating, at least at this point, you'd be able to say, yes, this ingress class as a Kubernetes resource, it is implicated by 9 different types of relationships. And so of the current Meshery version that I have, and of the current set of models that I've loaded up into the registry, 9 relationships implicate this thing. And so all the potential relationships that it could have are such and such. Now, when you're writing a relationship definition, like we were looking at in the spreadsheet, and you're writing it out and saying, well, this thing is for that description that you're typing into JSON, it just shows up right here in the tooltip to help describe to people what that thing is about. So here, and by the way, please be critical. I'm going to shut up at some point. It's just be critical, express opinion to help you all interpret this real fast. This is saying it's possible to have there are 2 different edge relationships that can be formed with this ingress class. So there can be an edge that goes from, and this is confusing, I think we're missing a word, from to all. There can be an edge that goes from all components in the model called Meshery shapes. Okay, the model called Meshery shapes is this one. If I go in here and just grab one of these things, and I go to establish an edge relation, an annotation, okay, it said, and yeah, it snaps to it. If I click it and say to form, the front end talked to the back end and they conferred and they said, yeah, that's feasible. Okay, well, that's interesting. That's how I interpreted, though. I've got one active relationship now, or the developer, the contributor that works on this, he likes to call them relations, not relationships. So we're still battling that out. But so it has one active one. Cool. Well, which one is that of the 9 that were possible? Which one was that? Was it the this one or the this one? I don't know. Okay. Well, hey, there's a tooling enhancement that could happen, or okay.
And the JSON that comes in that spreadsheet that drives all this on the front end, does that end up on the on the server driving the Rego engine as well? Is that where those relationships come from?
Yes, precisely. Yes. So one of the workflows that runs every day, literally wget or does a curl or downloads the Google Sheet to CSV, parses through the whole thing, and blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. And as part of that workflow, writes and auto commits and merges to the Meshery repo, all of those models and all of what they contain. So if they contain so I'm trying to find like the Kubernetes one. So if we inspect this verbatim, this is, or we would find, I don't want to lie. We'll find this exact thing back inside the spreadsheet. The reason I said I don't want to lie is like, well, technically, like, I don't know if like there's some intelligence that like as part of that process, we might say, hey, look, there really isn't an ID for the, yeah, like whatever. But yeah, that the spreadsheet is, well, it's probably not completely traditional for other, projects to, it's like, you guys are using test-driven development or using spreadsheet-driven development? Well, shit. Yes, fine. At the moment, spreadsheet-driven development, because it's, pardon my French, it's like it's a super long, because, oh my goodness, it's so much easier to deal with all this in there and to make sweeping changes and to take advantage of data validation, blah, 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 et cetera. Now, okay, so if you're contributing and and in order to like, we were just talking about some of the ways in which you can make a change. So make a change and test it and verify it. It's like, do I have to wait once a night to get this? Like, there are Meshery CTL commands that any of you can run that will reach out, grab a spreadsheet, a Google sheet, convert it to CSV. Or now, actually, you can just start from CSV. Or fine, you can skip the CSV stuff. You can just go right to the JSON and make some changes. Right now, one of the pains in my rear end is how and when. Slope, can you tell us the latest on, like, if I'm running a Meshery server right now, I built it, I'm running it, and then I make a change to one of these definitions.
Yeah.
Do I have to reboot my Meshery server to get this to take effect? Can I just dynamically import this new?
So inside the import, you can directly, there's a registry. On registry, there's a button import. You can directly import those relationships, but it needs to be packed inside of model. So there should be a model that contains that particular relationship, and you can dynamically import them without closing your Meshery server. Or what you can do is you can just close the server and reboot again.
Cool. So I check out Meshery code here into my Meshery fork, and so yeah. So anyway, there's a few different. So anyway, this is one of the ways in which you can go over and load up new. You can import models, right? And there's a couple of different ways, but yeah, good. So that's nice to hear that you don't have to rebuild Meshery server. You don't have to kill it and restart it. You can just import. But there's some tooling enhancements that would be really helpful. Some DevX enhancements that would be helpful.
One question I had maybe in that area is, so like the policy engine, like theoretically that's like a kind of standalone component and could be tested without the server at all, right? And I know you've been looking at the schlock. Is that well defined? I've been messing with it a little bit to try to like test, I don't know, using like the OPA CLI or something, and haven't had a lot of success yet. Is that process? Does anyone, I guess, have a good process for that, or what's the current best way to be testing those policies locally?
Yeah, so I don't know whether it's the best way or not, but today I was trying to run them. So there's this OPA CLI that you can use. And if you just pass in the complete policies directory and then your input.json that contains the design file. So it will evaluate and give you a response. And if you use the dev tool, then you can start printing them out and seeing, okay, where the particular policy is breaking, and then you can further debug it. So I don't think that is documented, or I couldn't find any. So I'm just messing around today, so I found it.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, maybe we can talk on Slack and you can help me with that command.
Yep.
Yeah, I was trying to get that CLI to work and okay, cool.
Where have the Rego policies moved to?
I think that's still inside server Kubernetes and 1.25.2.
Okay. So that there's a leftover artifact, like the Kubernetes model has it appropriately has relationship definitions, but it inappropriately has the Rego code as well. That is meant to be very generically written to interpret all kinds of and it needs to be yanked out of there. And this is a good folder, or we could move this policies folder under server if we wanted to, but whatever. But it's it's inappropriate for it to be in there. Yeah, Chris, that's exactly the kind of, and like we very much need that sort of thing well written down. There is there's some of the things that I just said, there's some pretty decent I don't think we've got it linked right here. Pretty decent I'm sorry, yeah, we do. It's right here. Documentation about these models and how relationships work, how you are contributing to them. And so this doc, as you go through that and you're figuring out that like, oh, see, I can just, here's how I can test them independently. This doc is, well, it's not the mother, it's the mother load at the moment, I suppose, from a contributor perspective. It talks about some of the concepts that we were just, and the scope, we were sort of alluding to scope and how scope is dealt with. And like, but yeah. Oh man, we are at such an early phase, or like we've done, there's been so much work done on this component, yet just like we're still at the starting line. The concepts behind, yeah, the way that, anyway, try not to talk your head off. Just a lot of concepts behind like these actions as well, and a workflow engine tethered to this, and so ultimately, I said that there's a bit of a duplicity between the front end having sort of a lightweight evaluation engine. I think that's a really strong term, an overly strong term to use to describe it. That ideally that, wait a second, you're doing the same thing, you're writing the same thing twice. No, we shouldn't be. Ideally in the front end, or rather, ideally, the OPA library that we're using, instead of it just being embedded, and Chris has heard this like 15 times, instead of it being inside of Meshery server, it would be just compiled using WebAssembly so that we can, in a UI like this one, embed it right in the UI so that a couple things happen. One is the evaluation is like hopefully very fast and real time, good experience for the user. But arguably more importantly, that there isn't a delta between what that feasibility analysis that's happening in the front end versus the authoritative back end full-blown evaluation engine. The two shouldn't be, in order for them to never have a discrepancy, you just have one. Folks, I'm sure, oh yeah, we're a little over time. Thoughts and questions and things.
Yeah, I mean, this seems like an area maybe that could really be an easy benefit from tests, seeing as it's meant to be like I don't know, it's sort of self-contained, rather than like the end-to-end tests are complicated since there's so many different components. But this, if we could get, I know OPA has its own testing sort of tooling, so maybe some high value, low sort of ambiguity tests could be helpful here.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, speaking Hey, of the linter, this, I guess it's Regal is how you would say it, I guess. Of the linter, is that something that's able to be run from the CLI as well?
There was a change that I put up to run that through through CI/CD, and I think maybe that's not working, or I don't know. There's a GitHub action for it that I thought would run on pull requests, but it seems like maybe it's not currently. So maybe I had an issue. Yeah, this PR is up to move that. I think this has some failing end-to-end tests, but I'm not sure that they're necessarily related. So
Yeah. Jaren's, I just want to rub it in a little. If you heard that, what Chris just said? It's like,
yeah.
okay. But anyway, we'll get, yeah. Chris, there's a number of things to subsequently follow through on, and
Yeah,
I'm here to support. Yeah, please lead the way. That
sure.
what you would just,
Yeah, happy to.
Oh, as an update, Uzair in specific isn't with layer 5 anymore, or isn't focused on this project anymore. And so Shlok is the new Uzair, or rather he'll be focused here as well. So you're right about trying to parlay and get some. And while we're talking to Chris, I mean, Renato and Sangram and everybody else, like, this is, you can't ask a stupid question. First of all, I probably don't know the answer, for my part, but Chris and Shlok are moving pretty fast, and so it's a good time to jump in. We've got a couple of Styra employees or OPA maintainers that are in the community, and they had been overly generous, I think, with their time and with trying to help make us Meshery successful with how we're using OPA. So, there's resources after the resources. Gents, is there anything else that we should cover today? We might want to get one or two of Chris's suggestions into a GitHub issue or two, or just sort of make sure we're laying out the path forward for ourselves.
I think we are on time, so I'll be concluding the meeting. Before just concluding, there's this Meshery test plan, the standing agenda item. We mostly discussed through it today. The CLI and CI/CD stuff, as well as the normal playwright test. So everyone is welcome to contribute and open up some issues, or you can ask any questions if you have regarding this on Slack. As well, I would request everyone of you to start the Meshery repo. We are nearly at 6K. It was 5928 or 29 before the meeting. So I think we are nearly at 6K. I think we'll reach it this week or next week. And if there is any question, feel free to ask on Slack. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, I'll see you.
Thank you, Renato. Yeah. Bye, guys.
Thank
See
you.
you later.